We got some big Star Wars news. Allegedly, Star Wars and Lucasfilm boss Kathleen Kennedy is planning to potentially exit Lucasfilm at the end of this year. This was first reported by Matthew Bellany at Puck. I'm actually a fan of his. I listen to The Town. He leads that podcast on The Ringer. Very much a connected insider. He reported in Puck that Kathleen Kennedy at the end of this year is apparently stepping away. Now, it's long been rumored that she's going to step away like multiple years now. It was a rumor last year. Didn't really happen. She's been there for 13 years. She's been there for quite a while. She's the successor to George Lucas. When George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney for $4 billion back in 2012, he handpicked Kathleen Kennedy to lead Lucasfilm, and she's been the president ever since. This specific information comes from Variety. I'll read this off and then we'll talk about it. Variety says this, quote, Kathleen Kennedy, the longtime president of Lucasfilm, is expected to step down at the end of 2025. She intends to retire after her current contract ends, according to a source with knowledge of her plans. A separate source close to Kennedy, however, dismissed the initial report by Puck as, quote, pure speculation and said nothing has been decided. Kennedy joined Lucasfilm in 2012 as co-chair alongside Star Wars creator George Lucas. Shortly after, Lucas exited his post as Disney acquired the company for $4 billion, and Kennedy was elevated to president. Then later on, that's the end of that article. Later on, a couple of days later, Deadline published an article with an interview with Kathleen Kennedy herself, where she addressed this rumor and innuendo through her own words. And she had this to say to Deadline, quote, the truth is, and I just want to say loud and clear, I am not retiring. I will never retire from movies. I will die making movies. That is the first thing that's important to say. I am not retiring. What's happening at Lucasfilm is I have been talking for quite some time with Bob and Alan about what eventual succession might look like. We have an amazing bench of people here, and we have every intention of making an announcement months or a year down the road. We are on lockstep as to what that's going to be, and I am continuing. I'm producing the Mandalorian movie right now, and I'm also producing Sean Levy's movie, which is after that. So I'm continuing to stay at Lucasfilm and looking very thoughtfully with Bob and Alan as to who's stepping in. So that is all underway, and we have every right to make that announcement when we want to make it, end quote. So, a lot to digest there. Kathleen Kennedy has had, I would say probably at best, a very mixed tenure at Lucasfilm.
Yes.
A lot of big success, a lot of big misses as well. What say you about Kathleen Kennedy? If this is truly the end of her tenure as Lucasfilm president, looking back on just like what she's been able to do, maybe some of the drawbacks, like how do you feel about this news? Is it time for her to step away? Do you think she did a good job? Is it time to just move in a new direction? What are your thoughts on Kathleen Kennedy possibly stepping down?
Just speaking to her tenure in general, I mean, you can't hide the facts that it has been very mixed bag, especially the way we've been talking about Star Wars on this podcast in particular. It's just been an up and down roller coaster of that's cool, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad, that's cool, that's bad, that's bad. The only thing about this, and a lot of it, a lot of people do point fingers at Kathleen Kennedy saying, when I remember a couple of days ago when people were hearing she might be stepping down, people were like, oh my God, Star Wars can finally recover, this and that. Oh my God, she's leaving Lucasfilm. I think the only thing for me is Kathleen Kennedy is not to blame for everything that has gone bad within Star Wars to me. Like, she can't be like the sole Kathleen Kennedy. Star Wars for the last 10 years has been I just can't point all the fingers at her and everything that has went down completely. Does she serve as the head and supposed to take those hits? Yes, I think so. I think that is definitely the role she's taken on, but I don't think it's 100% fair. That being said, if she steps down, I mean, part of me likes the idea of a new look for Star Wars. Part of me likes the new idea for Lucasfilm by the end of the year. I'd be okay with that. That's fine. Like, let's do something different, because clearly what we're doing now is not working. There are things that work here now and here and there in between, for sure, but it's not working good enough for what we need it to be. We need we need something different, I think, in what we're looking for in Star Wars, and it hasn't happened. And it has been under her reign. So I think if she steps down, or if she was to step down, fine. I think that's okay. But at the same time, I can't just place all the blame on her.
So I think I want to unpack this a little bit more. I have an idea maybe for a future topic of how we can really dive into this conversation. But what I will say, just in general reaction to this news, it's been a mixed bag for sure for her reign as president of Lucasfilm. There have been some really, really huge successes. Like, we cannot
Yeah,
deny the fact that she has produced 5 Star Wars movies that collectively have made almost $6 billion at the box
it's a lot of
office.
money.
That ain't nothing to sneeze at.
Hmm.
And that's a huge success. However, at the same time, we have not had a Star Wars movie in over 6 years now, theatrically. And it will be 7 by the time the Mandalorian movie comes out. And for an IP as valuable as Star Wars, when Disney purchased it for the money that they purchased it, I know that that
Hmm.
was not in their plans to wait in between this long for Star Wars movies to come out. And I guess my biggest knock against Kathleen Kennedy is kind of the fact that Star Wars under her tenure has kind of turned into a television brand.
Right.
I'm not a fan of that. This is a theatrical brand. This is probably the most powerful theatrical IP that's ever existed in
Hmm.
Hollywood. That's how it should be presented. I think almost always, with a few exceptions here and there. That first season of The Mandalorian was great. Second season was great. Then we started to kind of get a little bit oversaturated with it and maybe produce far too many shows at the same time. And we started to get very
Hmm.
middling results. Things like the Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka is just like, oh, kind of okay. And and
Hmm.
and and the Acolyte last year, just not a good show. And really, I think the biggest thing that's been critical of her, and that we'll have to look back on and really, really unpack, is just the relationships with filmmakers and kind of the will they won't they track of a lot of these movies that have been development. There have been so many stops and starts with things, so many filmmakers that have come and gone. You know,
Yeah.
the Benioff and Weisses, the Lord and
Hmm.
Millers who got kicked off of Solo, Colin
Eddie.
Trevorrow, just the list goes on and on. I don't even have enough
Hmm.
time to like go through everybody here. But at the same time, like, you know, Kathleen Kennedy, she is probably inarguably the greatest producer in the history of Hollywood. She is
Yeah,
phenomenal from a production side of things. Like, her resume it's spotless,
it's
damn
insane.
near.
Yeah.
She
Hmm.
has everything. Like, I'll just name a few, just a few, not even everything. Jurassic Park, The Sixth Sense,
Yeah.
the entire Indiana Jones franchise, E.T.,
Hmm.
Lincoln, The
Hmm.
Color Purple, War of the Worlds, Schindler's List, the Back to the Future franchise, Munich. All of these movies mostly produced between her and Steven Spielberg directing. But just because you're a great producer doesn't make you a great studio head and a great president
Yeah.
of a studio. Those are two
Hmm.
different jobs. And I think we've seen that take shape throughout these 13 years, that she is a phenomenal producer and has done some of the best movies ever, literally hands
Yeah.
down. But does that translate to studio head work and being a president and running an entire operation in this franchise that has all these different branches, that has films and TV and amusement parks and merchandising and licensing and animated shows and video games? Like, are you good at that? I don't know. We'll have to think
Hmm.
about that and really unpack her legacy when it's all said and done. But I agree, everything can't be blamed on her. But
Hmm.
in the same token, as much praise as she gets, she's going to get the same amount of criticism when you are at the
Yep.
head of the studio in that manner. Any thoughts as to what's next for Star Wars? Who could take over? Who would even want this job? Because whoever gets it is honestly going to get it at a low point. They're not getting Star Wars in 2012 when everything
Hmm.
was possible and The Force Awakens hadn't come out. And when The Force Awakens does, it makes $2 billion and becomes, you know, the third highest grossing movie of all time at that point. And it
Yeah.
felt like everything was in front of us. Now it's not the same. So who even wants this job, and who would even be good to possibly take it over moving forward for Star Wars?
I don't know, man. If this was more of a creative question, I think I would know some people. But because there's so much that goes into actually being a president of Lucasfilm, all those things you said, there's so many different things you have to know. But part you can't just be a straight up you know, you can't just be all about the movies themselves and the artistic. You got to be about the business. Like, you got to know what you got to be about, everything that comes with it. And it's really hard for me to know people who would do that, you know what I mean, and who have that kind of capability. Because part of me understands why they picked Kathleen Kennedy. Like, you've been producing all these films, you might understand all of these other things that goes into it. And I think, part of what you said, you're just a good producer doesn't necessarily always make a good president of, or big head executive of something like this, or something as big as Lucasfilm. But who who does make sense, in that moment, who has been, I guess, groomed to be somebody that can do that. I honestly have not a clue. I couldn't even tell you.
She says allegedly that their bench is deep, that they have somebody, they have options lined up. I find that hard to believe. I point them out, please.
Nobody's gonna want to do it. Yeah, nobody's gonna want to do it.
It's an unenviable position to be in. I agree about the creative side of things. It should not be. I mean, she's a creative. She is a producer. Yeah, that is a creative role. And
she's creative. Mm-hmm.
I think when you step into being a studio head or an executive, that further removes you from the creative aspect of filmmaking. Like you are getting further and further away from that.
I agree.
And so I don't even know if a creative person would want to do it. People have been saying like, "Oh, Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni's a creative.
Yep.
That guy
John
is
a creative.
That's a creative guy. And
a creative.
John Favreau is going to make a lot more money filmmaking than he would as a studio head. Let's just be honest. Like the bank is going to look much better if he makes fucking Lion King 3 as opposed to, right, stepping into Lucasfilm. And so now they could do something similar to what DC has done and get a pairing, get a creative head and get a business head. Because that's what James Gunn is doing. James Gunn is creative, and James Gunn has said this himself. Like, the business shit, no, that ain't me. I'm a creative guy. That's Peter. Peter handles the business stuff. Like, I am here to help shepherd creatively what this is going to look like. I think they probably have to take a similar approach. It's just it's a big job, man.
It is.
There's only so many people in Hollywood that can even do this job. Like, this is not like a widely open thing where like there's the thousands of people who are even qualified for this. You could probably count them on your hand, The only executive I can think of, but I think she has a job right now, so I don't know if she will want it. But Mary Parent is over at Legendary. She produces Dune and the Godzilla franchise. And those have been hugely successful for Legendary and Warner Brothers. She's been doing a pretty good job. And they have an iron fist on how they rule those IPs and those franchises. But I think she has a really good job. I don't know if she would want to give up that gig, but maybe Disney can poach her, if they're interested. But I would still pair her potentially with a creative person.
With a creative. If it was Mary Parent and like Dave Filoni?
Potentially so. That could be a good pairing,
That's it could be
assuming that they could work well together, and be collaborative. But that could be something interesting. But I don't know. Like I said, I think we can dive into this more, maybe down the line. But it's a, this news in alignment with the James Bond news, like shit is in transition big time right now in Hollywood. Like things are changing significantly for many of the biggest franchises known in Hollywood. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all shapes out.